be able to respond in a brief answer as well. So thank you very much. So resuming debate, the honourable member from Carleton.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It's great to be back here, and I'd like to take the occasion to thank family and friends who supported me, volunteers who worked to help with my re-election, electors who chose me, and even those who didn't, for the privilege of serving in this august chamber. And I'd like to thank most of all the people of Carleton, my newly constituted riding, for giving me the chance. And it is newly constituted, but it is very much a historical place. In fact, John A. Macdonald was elected in the riding of Carleton, and of course, the century before, its namesake, Sir Guy Carleton, was the Lieutenant Governor of Quebec. So in a small sense, history is repeating itself with the reemergence of these boundaries and this riding, but it's also repeating itself with the new government. We have today, as we did almost a century ago, a Prime Minister who is a Liberal, who is a Quebecer, and who speaks of sunny ways. Of course, sunny ways is not an expression that he invented. It's one he inherited from then Prime Minister Laurier, who, of course, is one of the greatest Prime Ministers this country has ever had. Prime Minister Laurier, yes, you can applaud that. Prime Minister Laurier said, "Canada shall be a star towards which all men who love progress and freedom shall come." More freedom at that time meant less government. From 1900 to 1910, federal, provincial, and municipal spending was a combined 9% of GDP. Today, it's about 40%. Low-cost government meant a low-tax nation. To quote the authors of the Canadian Century, Crowley, Clemens, and Velhouse, quote, "Laurier believed that the cost of government, and especially the tax burden, needed always to be kept below the level in the United States so as to create a powerful competitive advantage for Canada." Then, as now, Canada's low-tax plan worked. In the first 20 years of the 20th century, our population grew by an unprecedented 2/3, to quote the previous authors. The wheat yield in the three Canadian prairie provinces rose during Laurier's time by 500%. New and repair construction increased by almost 400%, and exports more than doubled. The rate at which the new companies formed and were chartered grew by 12 times during the first decade of that century. And that is a good moment in which to say that I will be splitting my time with the member for Abbotsford. Now, if today's Prime Minister were to bring sunny ways such as these, I think we would all rejoice. In fact, despite Laurier's partisan affiliation to what we call the Liberal Party, he would probably have recognized himself more in the policies of the previous government than the current one. Conservatives, in the last 10 years, brought free trade, free markets, and free people. In fact, we left Canada the freest country in the world, according to the Legatum Prosperity Index. We had the 6th freest economy in the world, according to the Wall Street Journal. And according to the Finance Department last week, we also had a balanced budget. Parliamentary Budget Officer has added that the projected surplus for this year, based on all the information available to him on the day that the current Liberal government took office, would have us running a surplus of $1.2 billion.
Good stuff.
And so in a sense, the Prime Minister of today has inherited sunny ways from his predecessors in the recent past. Much has been said about the gap between the rich and the poor and the plight of the middle class. And I'm glad that we should speak of these subjects because over the last decade, the facts are clear. Families moved out of poverty and into the middle class. The middle class got ahead and better off than any other country in the world. Between 2005 and 2011, during which time the Conservative government had been in power, take-home pay among low-income families was up 14% after tax and inflation. Even Andrew Coyne, who had previously endorsed the Liberals, admitted, quote, "In 2011, the last year for which Stats Canada has figures, the proportion of the population living on low income fell to its lowest level well, ever, at just 8.8%. It beat the previous record of 9% set in 2010. As recently as 1996, it was at 15.2%. In other words, end quote, in other words, poverty fell by almost half in 20 years. Of course, child poverty would be expected to rise during the great global recession that resulted from the financial crisis of 2008, but in fact, according to UNICEF, the opposite happened here in Canada. While children around the world were falling into poverty, here in Canada the poverty rate fell from 23 to 21%. The child poverty rate decreased from 23 to 21% during the recession, pulling roughly 180,000 children out of poverty. So, how did this happen? First, the reality is we increased the amount that Canadians can earn before they start paying taxes to remove 1 million low-income Canadians from the tax rolls altogether. If I could quote the Parliamentary Budget Office, in total, cumulative tax changes have reduced federal tax revenue by $30 billion, or 12%. These changes have been progressive overall. Low and middle income earners have benefited more, in relative terms, than high income earners. The same report points out that, quote, the highest 10% of income earners benefited the least, with after-tax gains of 1.4%, end quote. Our government enacted policies to free people from poverty, allowing them to enter the middle class. Yesterday's poor are today's middle class. So what is the state of the middle class? The ultra-liberal New York Times had something to say on this subject. Quote, "Life in Canada, home of the world's most affluent middle class."
Hear, hear.
That was the screaming headline. The same article then went on to say after-tax middle-class incomes in Canada substantially below in 2000 now appear to be higher than in the United States. And that must have been a very tough admission for the New York Times. Overall, under the previous government, personal income taxes are down 10%. Take-home pay is up 10%, on average, across all income levels. The median net worth of Canadians went up by 44%. We reduced poverty and freed middle-class strivers to get ahead, letting families keep more of what they earned, and to earn bigger and better wages in a big, open, opportunity-filled, free enterprise economy. There are ways, Mr. Speaker, other ways than tax relief to free people from despair and poverty and allow them to get ahead. I suggest that all of them are based on 3 pillars: work, family, and community. Not government, work, family, and community. Work, a job, is the best anti-poverty program there is. Family is the best social safety net we have. And community is what's left to take care of those people who don't, for no fault of their own, have work, or perhaps cannot rely on family. I'd like to share some stories that I've learned along the way, Madam Chair, Madam Speaker, as we continue with this debate. But I want to say, because the time is now running out, and the members are anxious to get on to their questions, let me just say that we in this country have an opportunity to continue to allow our middle class and our working families to get ahead if we remove the obstacles that government has put in the way, lift off the heavy burden of red tape, and continue to build an economy that is built on free trade, free enterprise, and free people. And I say this because of something I learned when I was Minister of Employment, and there was a bureaucratic decision to close a recycling plant not far from here that takes care of all of the used sensitive documents of the Government of Canada. 50 special needs people there recycle all of that paper on our behalf. They do it for very well and at a very low cost, and for some reason there was a bureaucratic decision to end that program. They were, of course, devastated. This was the place where they went. It was the place that gave them purpose. It was a place, as they say in Cheers, where everybody knew their name. Mr. Speaker, when I announced that I would intervene and save this program, I went to visit these incredible young people, and I said to one young man, what do you like best about your job? He said, work. I said, how can we make this place better for you? He said, send more paper. I don't want it to run out because I want to keep working. Mr. Speaker, that is the kind of enterprising spirit that should inspire us all and that can build the economy for the all.
Questions et commentaires?
Questions and comments.
Comments? The honourable member from Laurentides-Labelle.
Madam Speaker, the Conservatives have once again taken the opportunity to put forward real policy on this opposition day and traded it for a chance to talk about themselves and the mirage of their own ostensibly brilliant record. But if you take the old books off the Conservative stove long enough to read them, you might find a few entries that make sense. You won't find very many, though. If you have the calluses needed to turn those still warm pages, you will find a lot of capital assets that were quietly removed from the books. Liquidated, that is, sold. Turned from part of the inventory of supplies the government owns to provide services to the people, to a one-time supply of cash that can be, ever so briefly, used to show that the government is making money. When the Conservatives tell us that they balanced the budget, what they are not telling us is that they sold the house to pay out the mortgage. Unfortunately for them, Madam Speaker, Canada has found a new place to live.
The honourable member from Carleton.
Madam Speaker, first of all, I want to congratulate the member for some pretty impressive metaphors. I thought he put those together rather well. I'm going to avoid the metaphors and stick to the published facts, and I'm going to use two sources. One is the Fiscal Monitor that his finance minister authorized the publication of just last week, which showed that in the months immediately preceding his government taking office, that in fact Canada had an accumulated surplus of $1 billion. And according to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, in a document that was just recently was published in November as well, the PBO had a projected surplus of $1.2 billion for the present fiscal year. Now, these are not Conservative sources, and these are not books that were on the Conservative stove. We don't put our books on stoves because we don't believe in burning books. We believe in reading them. And these books tell us that Canada is in surplus, and that means sunny ways for us all.
Questions et commentaires. Questions and comments. L'honorable député
The honourable member for Sherbrooke. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I would like to congratulate my colleague on his re-election. As he has been here for quite some time now, I wonder if he agrees with the strategy that was used by Mr. Flaherty, who put in place an economic action plan to stimulate the economy by investing billions of dollars. And so I wonder if he agrees with that strategy that was used by his government, the previous government, and if he might agree with a similar strategy to stimulate our economy today in 2016 and maybe later if necessary. The honourable member for Carleton. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to congratulate the honourable member on his re-election as well. I think that he remains the youngest member of Parliament, so I congratulate him for that. And Madam Speaker, obviously I supported the policies of the Honourable Jim Flaherty. Also, in terms of reducing debt, we paid back $40 billion of national debt before the Great Recession, and that's one of the reasons why we have one of the lowest levels of indebtedness in the world. In fact, the lowest in the G8, and I think that we should keep that advantage by continuing to balance the budget and by reducing the burden on taxpayers who pay the bills. And I'm happy that when we left office, that the federal government was the lowest cost in it has been in 50 years at 12% of the economy. And that has allowed us to have a free, open economy, and I hope that the Liberals will continue to keep our economy free.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. On a le temps.
We have time for a brief question. The honourable member for Mississauga Lakeshore.
Si, Madame la
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, there seems to be a disconnect within the Conservative caucus. You know, at worst, it could be seen as audacious doublespeak. At minimum, it would be a factual misunderstanding between its own members. Over the past 2 weeks, we've heard member after member from the Conservative caucus stand up and tell us how much their ridings, which they characterized as middle class, are hurting. This member and his colleague from Edmonton, Widowaskins, seem to be suggesting that the middle class is strong. Which is it?
Brief answer from the member from Carleton, please.
Madam Speaker, the reality is that overall Canada's middle class has prospered throughout the last decade. Recent events, very recent events that have struck the world economy and affected our resource sector have caused families to suffer, and that is precisely why we need to continue to lower taxes, we need a strong fiscal position, and we need to free up resource development projects and pipelines that will create jobs, new jobs, and renewed opportunity for people right across this country. Thank you.